Arya. The scent of hot bread drifting from the shops along the street of flour was sweeter than any perfume Arya had ever smelled. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to the pigeon. It was a plump one, speckled brown, busily pecking at a crust that had fallen between two cobblestones, but when Arya's shadow touched it, it took to the air. Her stick sword whistled out and caught it 2 feet off the ground, and it went down in a flurry of brown feathers. She was on it in the blink of an eye, grabbing a wing as the pigeon flapped and fluttered. It pecked at her hand. She grabbed its neck and twisted until she felt the bone snap. Compared with catching cats, pigeons were easy. A passing septon was looking at her askance. "Here's the best place to find pigeon," Arya told him as she brushed herself off and picked up her fallen stick sword. "They come for crumbs." He hurried away. She tied the pigeon to her belt and started down the street. A man was pushing a load of tarts by on a 2-wheeled cart. The smell sang of blueberries and lemons and apricots. Her stomach made a hollow rumbling noise. "Could I have one?" she heard herself say. "A lemon, or any kind." The pushcart man looked her up and down. Plainly he did not like what he saw. 3 coppers. Arya tapped her wooden sword against the side of her boot. "I'll trade you a fat pigeon," she said. "The others take your pigeon," the pushcart man said. The tarts were still warm from the oven. The smells were making her mouth water, but she didn't have 3 coppers. Or 1. She gave the pushcart man a look, remembering what Sirio had told her about seeing. He was short, with a little round belly, and when he moved he seemed to favour his left leg a little. She was just thinking that if she snatched a tart and ran he would never be able to catch her, when he said, "You'll be keeping your filthy hands off. The gold cloaks know how to deal with thieving little gutter rats, that's what they do." Arya glanced warily behind her. 2 of the city watch were standing at the mouth of an alley. Their cloaks hung almost to the ground, the heavy wool dyed a rich gold. Their mail and boots and gloves were black. One wore a long sword at his hip, the other an iron cudgel. With a last wistful glance at the tarts, Arya edged away from the cart and hurried off. The gold cloaks had not been paying her any special attention, but the sight of them tied her stomach in knots. Arya had been staying as far away from the castle as she could, yet even from a distance she could see the heads rotting atop the high red walls. Flocks of crows squabbled noisily over each head, thick as flies. The talk in Flea Bottom was that the gold cloaks had thrown in with the Lannisters, that the commander was raised to a lord, with the lands on the Trident, and a seat on the King's Council. She'd heard other things, scary things that made no sense to her. Some said her father had murdered King Robert and had been slain in turn by Lord Renly. Others insisted that Renly had killed the king in a drunken quarrel between brothers. Why else would he have fled in the night like a common thief? One story said that the king had been killed by a boar while hunting, another that he'd died eating a boar, stuffing himself so full that he'd ruptured at the table. No, the king had died at table, others said, but only because Varys the spider had poisoned him. No, it had been the queen who poisoned him. No, he died of a pox. No, he choked on a fishbone. One thing all the stories agreed on. King Robert was dead. The bells in the 7 towers of the great sept of Baelor had tolled for a day and a night, the thunder of their grief rolling across the city in a bronze tide. They only rang the bells like that for the death of a king, a tanner's boy told Arya. All she wanted was to go home, but leaving King's Landing was not so easy as she'd hoped. Talk of war was on everyone's lips, and gold cloaks were as thick on the city walls as fleas on, well, her for one. She'd been sleeping in Flea Bottom, on rooftops and in stables, wherever she could find a place to lie down, and it hadn't taken her long to learn that the district was well named. Every day since her escape from the Red Keep, Arya had visited each one of the 7 city gates in turn. The Dragon Gate, the Lion Gate, and the Old Gate were all closed and barred. The Mud Gate and the Gate of the Gods were open, but only to those who wanted to enter the city. The guards let no one out. Those who were allowed to leave left by the King's Gate or the Iron Gate, but Lannister men-at-arms in crimson cloaks and lion-crested helms manned the guard-post there. Spying down from the roof of an inn by the King's Gate, Arya saw them searching wagons and carriages, forcing riders to open their saddlebags and question everyone who tried to pass on foot. Sometimes she thought about swimming the river, but the Blackwater rush was wide and deep, and everyone agreed that its currents were wicked and treacherous. She had no coin to pay a ferryman or take passage on a ship. Her Lord Father had taught her never to steal, but it was growing harder to remember why. If she did not get out soon, she would have to take her chances with the gold cloaks. She hadn't gone hungry much since she'd learned to knock down birds with her stick sword, but she feared so much pigeon was making her sick. A couple she'd eaten raw before she found Flea Bottom. In the bottom there were pot shops along the alleys with huge tubs of stew that had been simmering for years, and you could trade half your bird for a wheel of yesterday's bread and a bowl of brown, and they'd even stick another half in the fire and crisp it up for you, so long as you plucked the feathers yourself. Arya would have given anything for a cup of milk and a lemon cake, but the brown wasn't so bad. It usually had barley in it and chunks of carrot and onion and turnip, and sometimes even apple, with a film of grease swimming on the top. Mostly she tried not to think about the meat. Once she'd gotten a piece of fish. The only thing was, the pot shops were never empty, and even as she bolted down her food, Arya could feel them watching. Some of them stared at her boots or her cloak, and she knew what they were thinking. With others, she could almost feel their eyes crawling under her leathers. She didn't know what they were thinking, and that scared her even more. A couple of times she was followed out into alleys and chased, but so far no one had been able to catch her. The silver bracelet she'd hoped to sell had been stolen on her first night outside the castle, along with her bundle of good clothes, snatched while she slept in a burnt-out house off Pig Alley. All they left her was the cloak she'd been huddled in, the leathers on her back, her wooden practice sword, and Needle. She'd been lying on top of Needle, or else it would have been gone too. It was worth more than all the rest together. Since then Arya had taken to walking round with her cloak draped over her right arm to conceal the blade at her hip. The wooden sword she carried in her left hand, out where everyone could see it, to scare off robbers. But there were men in the pot shops who wouldn't have been scared off if she had a battle axe. It was enough to make her lose her taste for pigeon and stale bread. Off as not, she went to bed hungry rather than risk the stairs. Once she was outside the city, she would find berries to pick, or orchards where she might raid for apples and cherries. Arya remembered seeing some on the King's Road on the journey south, and she could dig for roots in the forest, even run down some rabbits. In the city, the only things to run down were rats and cats and scrawny dogs. The pot shops would give you a fistful of coppers for a litter of pups, she'd heard, but she didn't like to think about that. Down below the Street of Flower was an amazing twist of alleys and cross streets. Arya scrambled through the crowds, trying to put distance between her and the gold cloaks. She'd learned to keep to the centre of the street. Sometimes she had to dodge wagons and horses, but at least you could see them coming. If you walked near buildings, people grabbed you. In some alleys, you couldn't help but brush against the walls. The buildings leaned in so close they almost met. A whooping gang of small children went running past, chasing a rolling hoop. Arya stared at them with resentment, remembering the time she played at hoops with Bran and John and the baby brother Rickon. She wondered how big Rickon had grown, and whether Bran was sad. She would have given anything if John had been here to call her little sister and muss her hair. Not that it needed mussing. She'd seen her reflection in puddles, and she didn't think hair got any more muss than hers. She'd tried talking to the children she saw in the street, hoping to make a friend who would give her a place to sleep, but she must have talked wrong or something. The little ones only looked at her with quick, wary eyes and ran away if she came too close. Their big brothers and sisters asked questions Arya couldn't answer, called her names, and tried to steal from her. Only yesterday, a scrawny barefoot girl twice her age had knocked her down and tried to pull the boots off her feet, but Arya gave her a crack on the ear with her stick sword that sent her off sobbing and bleeding. A gull wheeled overhead as she made her way down the hole toward Flea Bottom. Arya glanced at it thoughtfully, but it was well beyond the reach of her stick. It made her think of the sea. Maybe that was the way out. Old Nan used to tell stories of boys who stowed away on trading galleys and sailed off on all kinds of adventures. Maybe Arya could do that too. She decided to visit the riverfront. It was on the way to the Mudgate anyway, and she hadn't checked that one today. The wharfs were oddly quiet when Arya got there. She spied another pair of gold cloaks walking side by side through the fish market, but they never so much as looked at her. Half the stalls were empty, and it seemed to her that there were fewer ships at dock than she remembered. Out on the black water, 3 of the king's war galleys moved in formation, gold-painted hulls splitting the water as their oars rose and fell. Arya watched them for a bit, then began to make her way along the river. When she saw the guardsmen on the 3rd pier in grey woolen cloaks trimmed with white satin, her heart almost stopped in her chest. The sight of Winterfell's colours brought tears to her eyes. Beside them, a sleek 3-banked trading galley rocked at her moorings. Arya could not read the name painted on the hull. The words were strange, Moorish, Bravosi, perhaps even High Valyrian. She grabbed a passing longshoreman by the sleeve. "Please," she said, "what ship is this?" "She's the Wind Witch out of Mere," the man said. "She's still here," Arya blurted. The longshoreman gave her a queer look, shrugged and walked away. Arya ran toward the pier. The Wind Witch was the ship Father had hired to take her home. Still waiting. She imagined it had sailed ages ago. 2 of the guardsmen were dicing together while the 3rd walked rounds, his hand on the pommel of his sword. Ashamed to let them see her crying like a baby, she stopped to rub at her eyes. Her eyes, her eyes, her eyes. Why did... "Look with your eyes," she heard Syrio whisper. Arya looked. She knew all of her father's men. The 3 in the grey cloaks were strangers. "You," the one walking rounds called out. "What do you want here, boy?" The other 2 looked up from their dice. It was all Arya could do not to bolt and run, but she knew that if she did, they'd be after her at once. She made herself walk closer. They were looking for a girl, but they thought she was a boy. She'd be a boy then. "Want to buy a pigeon?" She showed him the dead bird. "Get out of here," the guardsman said. Arya did as he told her. She did not have to pretend to be frightened. Behind her, the men went back to their dice. She could not have said how she got back to Flea Bottom, but she was breathing hard by the time she reached the narrow, crooked, up-paved streets between the hills. The bottom had a stench to it, a stink of pigsties and stables, and tanners' sheds, mixed in with the sour smell of wineskins and cheap whorehouses. Arya wound her way through the maze dully. It wasn't until she caught a whiff of bubbling brown coming through a pot-shop door that she realized her pigeon was gone. It must have slipped from her belt as she ran, or someone had stolen it and she'd never noticed. For a moment she wanted to cry again. She'd have to walk all the way back up to the Street of Flower to try and find another one that plump. Far across the city, the bells began to ring. Arya glanced up, listening, wondering what the ringing meant this time. "What's this now?" a fat man called from the pot shop. "The bells again, God a mercy!" wailed an old woman. A red-haired whore in a wisp of painted silk pushed open a second-story window. "Is it a boy king that's died now?" she shouted down, leaning over the street. "Oh, that's a boy for you. They never last long." As she laughed, a naked man slid his arms round her from behind, biting her neck and rubbing the heavy white breasts that hung loop beneath her shift. "Stupid slut!" the fat man shouted up. "King's not dead, that's only the summoning bells. 1 tower tolling. When the king dies, they ring every bell in the city." "Here, quit your biting, I'll ring your bells," the woman in the window said to the man behind her, pushing him off with an elbow. "So who is it's died if not the king?" "It's a summoning," the fat man repeated. 2 boys close to Arya's age scampered past, splashing through a puddle. The old woman cursed them, but they kept right on going. Other people were moving too, heading up the hill to see what the noise was about. Arya ran after the slower boy. "Where are you going?" she shouted when she was right behind him. "What's happening?" He glanced back without slowing. "The gold cloaks is carrying him to the sept." "Who?" she yelled, running hard. "The hand! They'll be taking his head off, Bo says." A passing wagon had left a deep rut in the street. The boy left over, but Arya never saw it. She tripped and fell, face first, scraping her knee open on a stone and smashing her fingers when her hands hit the hard-packed earth, needle tangled between her legs. She sobbed as she struggled to her knees. The thumb of her left hand was covered with blood. When she sucked on it, she saw that half the thumbnail was gone, ripped off in her fall. Her hands throbbed, and her knee was all bloody too. "Make way!" Someone shouted from the cross street, "Make way for my lords of red wine!" It was all Arya could do to get out of the road before they ran her down. 4 guardsmen on huge horses, pounding past at a gallop. They wore checked cloaks, blue and burgundy. Behind them 2 young lordlings rode side by side on a pair of chestnut mares, alike as peas in a pod. Arya had seen them in the bailey 100 times. The Redwine twins, Sir Horace and Sir Hobber, homely youths with orange hair and square freckled faces. Sansa and Jane Poole used to call them Sir Horror and Sir Slobber, and giggle whenever they caught sight of them. They didn't look funny now. Everyone was moving in the same direction, all in a hurry to see what the ringing was all about. The bells seemed to grow louder, clanging, calling. Arya joined the stream of people. Her thumb hurt so bad where the nail had broken that it was all she could do not to cry. She bit her lip as she limped along, listening to the excited voices around her. "The King's hand, Lord Stark. They're carrying him up to Baelor's Sept. I heard he was dead." Soon enough, soon enough. Here, I got me a silver stag, says they lob his head off." "Past time, the traitor," the man spat. Arya struggled to find a voice. "He never—" she started, but she was only a child and they talked right over her. "Fool, they ain't neither gonna lob him. Since when did they nick traitors on the steps of the Great Sept?" "Well, they don't mean to anoint him no night. I heard it was Stark killed King Robert, slit his throat in the woods, and then they found him. He stood there, cold as you please, and said it was some old boar that did his grace." "That's not true. It was his own brother did him. That Renly, him with his gold antlers." "Oh, shut your lying mouth, woman. You don't know what you're saying. His lordship's a fine true man." By the time they reached the Street of the Sisters, they were packed in shoulder to shoulder. Arya let the human current carry her along, up to the top of Visenya's hill. The white marble plaza was a solid mass of people, all yammering excitedly at each other and straining to get closer to the great sept of Baelor. The bells were very loud here. Arya squirmed through the press, ducking between the legs of horses and clutching tight to her sword stick. From the middle of the crowd all she could see were arms and legs and stomachs, and the 7 slender towers of the sept loomed overhead. She spotted a wood wagon and thought to climb on the back where she might be able to see, but others had the same idea. The teamster cursed at them and drove them off with a crack of his whip. Arya grew frantic. Forcing her way to the front of the crowd, she was shoved up against the stone of a plinth. She looked up at Baelor the Blessed, the Septon King. Sliding her stick sword through her belt, Arya began to climb. Her broken thumbnail left smears of blood on the painted marble, but she made it up and wedged herself in between the king's feet. Then she saw her father. Lord Eddard stood on the high septon's pulpit outside the doors of the sept, supported by 2 of the gold cloaks. He was dressed in a rich grey velvet doublet with a white wolf sewn on the front in beads and a grey wool cloak trimmed with fur, but he was thinner than Arya had ever seen him, his long face drawn with pain. He was not standing so much as being held up. The cast over his broken leg was grey and rotten. The High Septon himself stood behind him, a squat man, grey with age and ponderously fat, wearing long white robes and an immense crown of spun gold and crystal that wreathed his head with rainbows wherever he moved. Clustered around the doors of the sept, in front of the raised marble pulpit, were a knot of knights and high lords. Joffrey was prominent among them, his raiment all crimson, silk and satin patterned with prancing stags and roaring lions, a gold crown on his head. His queen mother stood beside him in a black morning gown slashed with crimson, a veil of black diamonds in her hair. Arya recognized the Hound, wearing a snowy white cloak over his dark grey armour, with 4 of the King's Guard round him. She saw Varys the eunuch sliding among the lords in soft slippers and a patterned damask robe, and she thought the short man with the silvery cape and pointed beard might be the one who'd once fought a duel for mother. And there in the midst was Sansa, dressed in sky-blue silk with her long auburn hair washed and curled and several bracelets on her wrists. Arya scowled, wondering what her sister was doing there. Why she looked so happy. A long line of gold-cloaked spearmen held back the crowd, commanded by a stout man in elaborate armour, all black lacquer and gold filigree. His cloak had the metallic shimmer of true cloth of gold. When the bell ceased to toll, a quiet slowly settled across the great plaza, and her father lifted his head and began to speak, his voice so thin and weak she could scarcely make him out. People behind her began to shout out, "What?" and "Louder!" The man in the black and gold armour stepped up behind father and prodded him sharply. "You leave him alone!" Arya wanted to shout, but she knew no one would listen. She chewed her lip. Her father raised his voice and began again. "I am Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Hand of the King," he said more loudly, his voice carrying across the plaza. "And I come before you to confess my treason in the sight of gods and men." "No," Arya whimpered. Below her, the crowd began to scream and shout. Taunts and obscenities filled the air. Sansa had hidden her face in her hands. Her father raised his voice still higher, straining to be heard. "I betrayed the faith of my king and the trust of my friend Robert," he shouted. "I swore to defend and protect his children, yet before his blood was cold I plotted to depose and murder his son and seize the throne for myself. Let the High Septon and Baelor the Blessed and the Seven bear witness to the truth of what I say. Joffrey Baratheon is the true heir to the Iron Throne, and by the grace of all the gods, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the realm." A stone came sailing out of the crowd. Arya cried out as she saw her father hit. The gold cloaks kept him from falling. Blood ran down his face from a deep gash across his forehead. More stones followed. One struck the guard to father's left. Another went clanging off the breastplate of the knight in the black and gold armour. Two of the king's guards stepped in front of Joffrey and the queen, protecting them with their shields. Her hand slid beneath her cloak and found needle in its sheath. She tightened her fingers round the grip, squeezing as hard as she'd ever squeezed anything else. "Please, gods, keep him safe," she prayed. "Don't let them hurt my father." The High Septon knelt before Joffrey and his mother. "As we sin, so do we suffer," he intoned in a deep swelling voice much louder than father's. "This man has confessed his crime in the sight of gods and men, here in this holy place." Rainbows danced round his head as he lifted his hands in entreaty. "The gods are just, yet blessed Baelor taught us that they are also merciful. What shall be done with this traitor, your grace?" 1,000 voices were screaming, but Arya never heard them. Prince Joffrey, no, King Joffrey, stepped out from behind the shields of his king's guard. "My mother bids me let Lord Eddard take the black, and Lady Sansa has begged mercy for her father." He looked straight at Sansa then, and smiled, and for a moment Arya thought that the gods had heard her prayer, until Joffrey turned back to the crowd and said, "But they have the soft hearts of women. So long as I'm your king, treason shall never go unpunished. Sir Ilyn, bring me his head." The crowd roared, and Arya felt the statue of Baelor rock as they surged against it. The High Septon clutched at the king's cape, and Varys came rushing over, waving his arms, and even the queen was saying something to him, but Joffrey shook his head. Lords and knights moved aside as he stepped through, tall and fleshless, a skeleton in iron mail, the king's justice. Dimly, as if from far off, Arya heard her sister scream. Sansa had fallen to her knees, sobbing hysterically. Sir Ilyn Payne climbed the steps of the pulpit. Arya wriggled between Baelor's feet and threw herself into the crowd, drawing needle. She landed on a man in a butcher's apron, knocking him to the ground. Immediately someone slammed into her back and she almost went down. Bodies closed in around her, stumbling and pushing, trampling on the poor butcher. Arya slashed at them with needle. High atop the pulpit, Sir Ilyn Payne gestured, and the knight in black and gold gave a command. The gold cloaks flung Lord Eddard to the marble, with his head and chest out, over the edge. "Here, you!" An angry voice shouted at Arya, but she bowled past, shoving people aside, squirming between them, slamming into anyone in her way. A hand fumbled at her leg and she hacked at it, hacked its shins. A woman stumbled and Arya ran up her back, cutting to both sides. But it was no good. No good, there were too many people. No sooner did she make a hole than it closed again. Someone buffeted her side. She could still hear Sansa screaming. Sir Ilyn drew a two-handed greatsword from the scabbard on his back. As he lifted the blade above his head, sunlight seemed to ripple and dance down the dark metal, glinting off an edge sharper than any razor. "Ice!" she thought. "He has ice!" Her tears streamed down her face, blinding her. And then a hand shot out of the press and closed round her arm like a wolf trap, so hard that needle went flying from her hand. Arya was wrenched off her feet. She would have fallen if he hadn't held her up, as easy as if she were a doll. A face pressed close to hers, long dark hair and tangled beard and rotten teeth. "Don't look!" a thick voice snarled at her. I... Arya sobbed. The old man shook her so hard her teeth rattled. "Shut your mouth and close your eyes, boy." Dimmed as if from far away, she heard a noise. A soft sighing sound, as if 1,000,000 people had just let their breath out at once. The old man's fingers dug into her arm, stiff as iron. "Look at me. Yes, that's the way of it. At me." Sour wine perfumed his breath. "Remember, boy?" It was the smell that did it. Arya saw the matted greased hair, the patched dusty black cloak that covered his twisted shoulders, the hard black eyes squinting at her. And she remembered the black brother who'd come to visit her father. "Know me now, do ya? There's a bright boy," he spat. "They're done here. You'll be coming with me and you'll be keeping your mouth shut." When she started to reply, he shook her again, even harder. "Shut, I said." The plaza was beginning to empty. The press dissolved round them as people drifted back to their lives. But Arya's life was gone. Numb, she trailed alongside. Yoren, yes, his name is Yoren. She did not recall him finding Needle, but he handed the sword back to her. "Hope you can use that, boy." "I'm not," she started. He shoved her into a doorway, thrust dirty fingers through her hair and gave it a twist, yanking her head back. "Not a smart boy? That what you mean to say?" He had a knife in his other hand. As the blade slashed toward her face, Arya threw herself backward, kicking wildly, wrenching her head from side to side. But he had her by the hair, so strong. She could feel her scalp tearing, and on her lips the salt taste of tears.
"Can I offer you a bowl of brown in these trying times?" You okay there?
No!
I think the crazy thing is...
Call it bowl of brown! Jesus!
And apparently the pots there have just been boiling away for years. They just keep refilling, so who knows? You might get like a rat toe from a year ago.
What a chunk of crud from 20 years ago that there's chips off the bottom of the pot.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Ugh.
The surprise in every bite.
Just costs you a pigeon.
A pigeon.
Or you'll get paid in money if you bring puppies.
Yeah,
to
we're
them.
not going to talk about that. That part makes me angry. Not okay with that.
Me either.
Not okay with that at all. But is Eddard dead?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he is.
Yes.
We don't know. She looks away too quickly.
I'm pretty sure Yoren's reaction tells us that Eddard Stark is dead.
Yeah.
He was beheaded. That happened.
That little shit Joffrey.
He did the thing that he was not supposed to do.
And it's all on him too, because Varys, his mother, everyone was just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Martin definitely sets it up very much for you to see that, like...
This was not a political move.
No, this was not supposed to go this way.
A murder.
A murder.
By a little spoiled sociopath.
Yeah, Cersei and Varys were very clearly not planning this at all and are freaking out that this just happened. Guarantee it.
Yep.
Um,
Because now they also have no leverage in the war.
Nope.
And now
The enemy.
Catelyn has Jaime.
Yep. Now,
Aha.
now, not only do the Lannisters not have Ned anymore, but they don't have Ned.
They
The
do
enemy,
have Sansa.
they do have Sansa. But will Sansa be worth one Jaime Lannister?
I mean,
To Catelyn,
Not-
sure. I'm sure.
I was just
Catelyn.
saying, not to me.
Listen, I'll give you 2 Sansas and 3 Rickons, and I'll throw in a Theon.
Look, we'll
For
give
your
you
Jaime
We'll
Lannister.
give you Sansa back. Best I can do as a cousin.
I'll give you Lancel. Wouldn't even give you Tyrion for Sansa. You can't have my Jaime Lannister. He's gilded in gold. He's the only foil I've got.
That would actually be kind of cool if they made like a Game of Thrones trading card.
Like Pokemon.
Yeah. Ooh, I have a Shining Eddard.
Shiny Eddard.
It's when he was young, fighting in Robert's Rebellion in shining steel armor.
Got an Alolan Robert. He's twice his normal size.
But yeah,
Either way, yeah, they just lost their biggest
we were
partner.
laughing too much at such a dramatic chapter.
We're trying to ease the pain
I think so.
of reliving the death of Eddard Stark, because it just sucks. Because it does.
It does.
He did the things. He sucked wind, sucked his honor up, and threw away his dignity and said, I did the thing, even though he didn't do the thing, and he was gonna take the black. And then what did Joffrey do? Walloped off his head. Just,
It's messed up.
it was not part of the deal.
But
And I don't think Rob is gonna be very happy about it.
No, he is definitely not. But from a reader's perspective, this is the point where you know whether you're into Game of Thrones or not. Like the beginning of this book, I remember reading it at first, and it's interesting. It's a good book, but it's nothing special. But then this chapter was when it just like caught me off guard, and I'm like, okay, what?
Wait, did what just happened?
Yep. And then from there, it's just like, okay, I need to know what happens. And then there's many more surprises to come in Game of Thrones
Just like
that keep you coming back for more.
it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. Turn the page. It was Quirrell.
I remember reading this the first time, and I'm like, oh, what's Arya gonna do? She's gonna like water dance across people's heads and get up and like slash or whatever,
kill everyone. And no,
or like someone, I don't know, someone from Eddard's guard is still alive. He's just gonna swoop in, and Eddard's gonna get
swashbuckled away.
Or you know those old Western movies when they're about to be hanged, and then the person like shoots the rope, and someone comes with a wagon underneath and catches them, and they ride away. Something like that. That's kind of what I was expecting, like the Great Escape. But the Great Escape did not happen.
No. I hate that Joffrey says too, like, but Lady Sansa and my mother, they're soft because they have the hearts of women. Like, vomit. So much about this chapter made me wanted to vomit.
Yeah, it did.
Flea Bottom, can we just... I know, like...
Flea Bottom's awful.
I know that, like, the big linchpin of the whole chapter is that Eddard Stark gets beheaded, and that's horrible. But we gotta talk about Flea Bottom for, like, a minute, because it's so horrible.
Very aptly named.
Ooh!
It's terrible.
Everything, like, Arya has been living there for how long?
Yeah.
They don't specify how long she's been there, but she's been surviving there, killing pigeons. And like, there's one part of the chat, not only the thing about the puppies, which was awful, but then the other thing about how when she has a hard time sitting and eating because some people stare at her and she knows that they want to rob her, and then other people stare at her, but she doesn't know why.
Oh yeah.
It's like, dude, they want to rape you, and it's
Yep.
really uncomfortable. Martin alludes to the fact that she's what, 7, 9?
No, she's like 9, or maybe it's only been like.
Either way, she's
6
very
months.
obviously a child. Some people think
Those
she's a
stories.
boy.
Mm.
Either way, boy, girl, she's obviously a child, and there are people looking at her.
Some people want to find out what gender she is.
Yes. Ew.
Yeah. It's messed up.
Ew.
But I think
But it's an accurate
does a great job at describing just how horrible it is, and it makes you. I don't know.
Like the whole chapter
it's
just
cringy,
it
but
is. But in
I
the right
think-
way.
Yeah, I think it's great writing because it makes you so cringy.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like you feel how disgusted she feels.
Yeah.
Like, being there. You know what I mean?
Yep. And like, what does he say? The first night she was there, she found out why they call it flea bottom.
Yeah.
Like, ooh. Who? What? I just don't know why people come there to live. I don't understand why they go there.
I don't think they have a choice. I think it's like a LA thing. I'm gonna go there and it's the city of dreams. I'm gonna make it big. And then you're in Flea Bottom.
You're in flea bottom. Oh. Well, I imagine that not every facet of King's Landing is awful.
Well, no.
Like, I'm sure.
But that's what I'm saying. There's probably the very nice places, and that's what everyone talks
Like,
about.
where Gendry lives seems okay.
Yeah.
The Armory District, like,
Yep.
that doesn't seem too bad. The Street of Flour, where all the bakers live and stuff. Although they probably put, like, plaster of Paris in the bread, like they did in the Victorian
No.
era. Yeah, I'm sure they did.
This was before that time. They're honest people.
They put something in there. Listen, I saw a
Just
special.
some cane.
I saw a special.
Magic bread. Keep you going all day.
When sugar first came to England, and I think it was like the Tudor era or something, when I saw they did a thing where they would make replica foods entirely out of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd put out like rashers of bacon and they'd look just like bacon, but they were just sugar.
So, caramel?
No,
Just like-
no. It's like just thick, like colored sugar. Bacon sugar. Sugar bacon.
Ew.
But it didn't taste like bacon sugar. It didn't have like a bacon. It just literally, you would bite. It was like a thing where they would make foods out of sugar, and the guests would come over and they'd be like, "Look at all this bacon and this ham and these eggs," and then you'd bite into it, and it's sugar. Oh, how lovely!
Oh, you got me. Good job.
Yeah,
I
I don't know where I was going with this, but
don't know either, but fun fact, I did learn about some like the Great Depression, like different foods and stuff.
oh god,
One of the like
oh god.
the foods that like kids would eat
I feel like I knew
was
this. I feel like you're gonna tell me.
sugar sandwiches.
Oh yeah, I've heard this before.
You just take 2 slices of bread, you'd butter them, sprinkle sugar in the middle, and there you go, sugar sandwich.
That actually doesn't sound like it would taste like terrible. I feel like there are
No,
worse things to eat in
You
life.
think of like cinnamon swirl bread,
Yeah,
and stuff,
it's-
brown sugar.
Kind of the same thing.
It's not terrible, but at the same time, I couldn't picture
Sugar
just
sandwiches.
eating a sugar sandwich. Like, sugar sandwich for lunch.
Well, it's like in To Kill a Mockingbird. Do you
Mhm.
remember In To Kill a Mockingbird when they have Walter Cunningham? They have the kid over for dinner. And
Not really.
oh,
It's been so long since I read that book.
they have the kid over for dinner. Walter Cunningham's family is like dirt poor. It's a Great Depression. They're farmers. They have no money. They pay for things with crops and seeds and stuff. And the kid's got the dinner, and he takes, it's like ham and potatoes and it's broccoli or something, I don't know. And he takes the maple syrup and he starts drizzling the maple syrup like all over the ham and potatoes. And Scout freaks out, and Atticus tells her to shut up. And she's like, but Atticus, he's gone and dripped the maple syrup all over the... And then she has to get up and leave the table. And Calpurnia tells her, never you mind, you let him eat the tablecloth if he wants to. He's your guest. And I just... Like, that kid is so starved for sugar and whatever else that he can't eat sugar sandwiches. He can't eat any of that. So he's at this dude's house. He's going to dump maple syrup all over his food because he never gets to eat it because he's that poor.
Take all the sugar I can get.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there you go. That's a perfect example. And that's the type of people that are eating the bowl of brown.
Ugh.
You know what's interesting? They
Rather
actually,
eat a sugar sandwich. Ooh.
they have the recipe for a bowl of brown in the Game of Thrones cookbook. Should make it sometime.
It's probably better than the real bowl of brown.
Yeah. I'm sure it has some flavor. You're not just throwing in random meat you find on the street. Random roadkill.
Ugh. I think this is Arya too, like the guy with the tarts, the tart cart rolls by, and she like wants one. She wants to trade a pigeon, and he's like, "No, give pay for this. I need cash. I need money." And up until now, she's lived a life where she's never had to pay for anything. Servants just bring her up. She's like realizing, kind of maybe coming to terms with how privileged her life really has been, because she has had a very privileged life. She's never had to work for anything she's ever had. She's never had to... She just, if she wants it, she asks for it, she gets it, And now it's just like, I can't just have the tarts. He doesn't want my pigeon. What am I gonna do? Yeah. She has no idea.
Yeah, I think now, well, save for Rickon, all the Stark kids have like entered a new phase in their life where they've gone from the children to the adults they're going to be. They're in that transition phase.
I mean, Rickon is having a hard time.
In this chapter, her life was over.
Yeah.
Because Eddard died.
Yeah.
Because...
Now what?
What does she do now? The life she's known is gone. Catelyn is at war with Robb. Robb is leading an army. His childhood's over. Bran is up in Winterfell playing Lord.
And still trying to adjust to not being able to use his legs.
Exactly.
Sansa is in...
We don't know.
She was
in complete denial before. Who knows what she's in now?
She's probably so incredibly traumatized.
Oh, please, Sansa. She's probably like, oh, well, yeah, it was a tough call, but I guess Joffrey did have the right to make that decision.
I don't know. I feel like this might be I don't know. Sansa really wanted to save her father. I think this might be the...
Yeah, I know. She's... Oh, see, he will listen to me.
Yeah, he totally didn't. Yeah. And now she's, like, stuck with them.
Yes. And then, Jon, well, we kind of saw, like, straight up, he's gone from boy to man.
He's fighting... Slowly. He's fighting ice zombies. Yeah. That's what Jon's doing.
And he found out how privileged he was real quick up at the wall.
Yeah, he was the first one to kind of wake up out of that hole, like, wow, geez, my life really has been great.
And you know how we read the description of where originally Martin wanted to go with the story, having Jon and Arya together?
Yeah.
Every time She says something about John, like, I see it happening in the book.
It's awful how she wishes John was here.
Rough
Muss
up
her hair.
and just call her little sister. I'm just
Ugh.
like, yeah.
Shades of
I'm so glad he changed his mind. But you can
Shades of-
see, like, he was planning that in this first
yeah,
book.
you could see it being laid out. Shades of
I'm just wondering.
Arya,
I'm kind of looking
or
for it to see, like, where he
changed his
kind of
mind.
diverged from that. Maybe it'll still happen. We don't know.
No, how? No, there's no way. There's no way.
No,
Shades of
I don't know.
Cersei and Jaime. There is what
Yeah.
it is. No.
Cersei and Jaime book, 50 Shades of Gold.
Arya is really using her skills in this chapter, though, like, because she almost ran up to those quote-unquote Winterfell soldiers, and
Yep.
she was about to, like, walk right into the trap, and then she stopped, and she, like, listened to Sirio's advice, and she was like, oh, wait. I don't recognize any of
Look
these
with
people.
your eyes.
Yeah, look with your eyes. And what she sees is like, yeah, no, this is not good. Sirio's lessons are proving very useful. Also, did you notice she's not catching cats? There are no cats. There are no cats anywhere.
Well, we only saw a little piece.
I think those cats know what's up. They don't go down to Flea Bottom if they know what's good for them. They're like,
Yeah, probably.
"Oh, I'm not going there. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Ah, Bill went down there last week, came back without a tail. And he's the lucky one.
That's what I mean. No, cats aren't going down there. Ugh. But she still has Needle.
Yes, that's true.
Good on her for still
So-
managing to keep a hold of Needle.
So I guess if anyone does try to rape her,
She will
She has that.
stick them with the pointy end. Ugh. This chapter was just awful.
it really
It's just awful. It's so awful. It's so gross and disgusting. And then Ned dies. And then Yoren shows up.
Right, the most disgusting character of the Night's Watch.
I know. The lice in his beard. Like, that's what I remember about him.
He fits right into Flea Bottom.
The lice in the beard. And I'm pretty sure he hugs Arya and her face goes right into his beard too. And it's just like...
No wonder he, like, cuts her hair afterwards. I get these lice out.
And I think he's very much... She's like, no. What does he say? You're not a very smart boy, are you?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not a boy. I'm not a boy. And he's like, you're not a very smart boy, are you? Like, trying to tell her, like...
I know. Arya, listen.
Being a boy is the safest thing for you right now. So be a boy.
And she did get pretty lucky because, now Yoren is probably going back up to the Night's Watch and gonna pass through Winterfell.
Is he, though?
Where else would he go? Is he gonna desert and run south?
That's true. I mean, maybe he'll sell her to the Lannisters and take a ship to Pentos and run away.
Maybe. Can you buy your way out of the Night's Watch?
I think Cersei Lannister would pay him whatever he wants for Arya Stark.
Yeah, right now. It's like we said, also got Sansa. That's not gonna get you far.
I don't even think Sansa and Arya would be enough for one Jaime Lannister. Maybe. I don't know.
Catelyn's mother love is fierce.
But Robb is the boss. Technically. He's the leader of the army. Yeah.
Mama Stark is he get a little crazy sometimes.
No, you don't.
And
You
even
don't say.
I don't know, but who knows? Maybe at this point, Theon will get his chance to just cut off Jaime's head.